Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sireen. I'm a master's student. I'm studying environmental science and engineering. I'm a member of Students for Sustainability, known as S Square at KAUST. I'll welcome you to this semester's second sustainability seminar. The Sustainability Seminar series was initiated in March 2020 with the support of the Head of Sustainability and Graduate Affairs at KAUST as a platform for raising scientific and community engagement on the complexity of sustainability topics. So, our topic today, as you can see, is the psychology of climate change. And it'll be presented by Dr. Anna. Dr. Anna Aznar is an internationally published child psychologist with a general interest in children's socio emotional development. Her research examines children's understanding of emotions, and she is particularly interested in children's emotions around climate change. Her, her work has been translated into over 10 languages and featured widely in scientific publications such as the Journal of Experimental Child Psychology, as well in the popular press. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Anna.
Good afternoon. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to be here at Cannes today. My name is Anna Aznar, and I'm a child psychologist. Yeah, better? Yeah. Okay. And so very often when I tell people that I'm a child psychologist and I do research on climate change, people often wonder, what does psychology have to do with climate change? And maybe you're asking the same question. So let me go into this before we start with the talk. Think about issues such as this one. Think about wildfires, pollution, deforestation, waste. What do all these problems have in common? Any idea? We cause them, exactly. They are caused by humans, right? And only humans can find a solution for them, right? And given that psychology is a science that examines human behavior, psychology has a lot to say in the climate change crisis. I'm assuming that most of you don't have a background in psychology, so let me be a bit more specific. Let me tell you how some of the fields within psychology contribute to the study of climate change. So if you think, for example, about environmental psychology, they, for example, examine what are the best messages to give people about climate change so that the messages are effective and people change their behaviors to more sustainable ones. Cognitive psychology. They examine the cognitive mechanisms around climate change, how we perceive it, how we risk perception of climate change, creative ideas around climate change. Business psychology. They collaborate with businesses to make them work in a more sustainable way. Political psychology. They work into making law and policies more effective around climate change. Clinical psychology. They work with people to help them tackle the consequences of climate change for mental health. Child psychology, my field. We look into how children perceive, think, reason, and feel towards climate change. So as you can tell, there's a lot that psychology can do in the fight towards climate change. In fact, I believe that climate change crisis is not an environmental crisis, but a psychological crisis. One of the big questions that psychologists have been trying to examine and understand for a long time is what we call the climate change paradox. This paradox states that why is it that even though we know, most of us, we acknowledge that climate change is happening, we know that it's happening, we know that it is in our power to solve it, but most of us don't change our behaviors. to tackle climate change. So why is that? Why is it so difficult for us to behave in a sustainable manner to tackle the problem of climate change? And to answer this question, to answer the climate change paradox, we need to look at the concept of psychological distance. Psychological distance is an indicator of how close or how far people feel from a particular object, person, event, or idea. So we can feel particularly close or far to your spouse, to your religion, to your political party. And in the case of climate change, it is very important to understand how close or how far people feel from climate change, because we know that when people feel very close to climate change, they engage in more sustainable behaviors. They change their behaviors. But we also know that many people report feeling very far away from the issue of climate change. And why is that? Why do we feel so distant to the issue of climate change? To understand this, we have to look at the climate at psychological distance from 4 different dimensions. One is the geographic dimension. Climate change, for many of us, and for most of us living in the global north, happens to people and happens in places very far away. So they tell us about, the melting of the ice in Greenland. They tell us about the deforestation in the Amazon. They tell us about some islands in the Indian Ocean. Yes, but they're very far from us, right? I have many other issues, more pressing issues in my life. So yes, climate change is a problem, but it's so far away that it's not in my everyday thoughts. It's not my main worry, so I don't change my behavior. If we look at it from a temporal dimension, a similar thing happens. We're seeing increasingly more and more effects of climate change, but for the most part, still the effects of climate change will happen in many, many years to come. We won't be here, most of us. So why should I care? Again, I have many other things in my life to worry about. So I don't change my behavior. I feel distant to the issue of climate change. Another dimension is a social dimension. And again, for most of us living in the global north, the effects of climate change are happening to people very far away. People not like me. In psychology, we talk about the in-group and the out-group. The in-group is my family, my community, the people like live and feel and believe like me. And then we have the out-group, the other people that is not like me. We tend to worry about our in-group, right? To give you an example, and again, climate change happens to the out-group for most of us. People like they're fine, but they're not my main worry. My main concern is my in-group, people like me. To give you an example of how the in-group out-group dynamic works, do you remember in 2006 where there was a tsunami in Christmas in Thailand? Remember, when the tsunami happened, there was an appeal for help, for aid, right? That appeal for that tsunami, they raised the most money, I won't say ever, but an incredible amount of money from Europe and America. Do you know why that much money was raised in that particular event? Okay, it was Christmas, which is, we all know that around Christmas, we all feel more generous and more sensitive, Christmas time is good. And someone else is something. Exactly. The Westerners were on holidays. So many people felt in America and Europe that it was their in-group that was suffering at that moment. And so the appeal was massive. And the Christmas effect also, I think, plays a part. But that's an example of how the in-group, out-group dynamics work. And finally, in the climate change issue, we feel distant to it because there's still a level of uncertainty. Some people say still, yeah, climate change, yeah, there's a lot of talk, but nothing happens much, right? If the predictions were true, Miami will be underwater now. Look at Miami, it's perfectly fine, right? And some people even deny that climate change is happening. So again, we don't worry about it. Why should I worry about a problem that may not happen when my first worry is that I have to pay my mortgage next month, right? So from a psychological perspective, we don't feel close to climate change. And then we don't change our behaviors into more environmentally friendly ones. And because we don't feel close to the issue of climate change, we also don't perceive climate change to be a big risk, Because from a psychological point of view, it is not that climate change is a bad risk. It is a terrible risk. And so we don't change our behaviors. So from a psychological perspective, a good risk is new. So if you think about COVID a few years ago, what happened? We were all scared. We all changed our behaviors like this, right? It was new. It was a new risk. Climate change is a bad risk because it's old. We have been talking about climate change for decades. And for many people, nothing much has happened. So bad risk. We don't change our behaviors. A good risk is personified. It happens to people that we can see, that we know. Again, COVID, sadly, many of us have people that died or were very sick. We could see it in people. But climate change tends to be anonymous. It happens, again, to people that we don't know, far away. It's quite anonymous for us. So it's a bad risk. And finally, a good risk is visible. So what do we consider a good risk? A plane crash. And it's very spectacular, right? A nuclear accident is visible, big risk, good risk from a psychological point of view. Climate change, they tell us that if I drive my car, then the pollution that I emit is going to go into the atmosphere, and there's something's going to happen there. I cannot see it. And we tend to disregard risks that we cannot see. So again, climate change is a horrible risk, which means that we don't change our behaviors to more sustainable ways. I mean, in this one, you have to think that there's some personal differences. So usually, if we have, for example, been victims of climate change, if we have lived, for example, through a flood or an earthquake or a tornado, we'll consider climate change a bigger risk. But then this also changes through time. So for example, if you remember some years ago when the Sandy storm hit New York, just in the aftermath of Sandy, they were asking people, how worried are you about climate change? People were very worried. They asked them the same question, same people in New York, a couple of years later, the level of risk and perception and worry had dropped a lot. Yeah, but from a psychological perspective, climate change is a bad risk. And this is a problem because what we want is to change behaviors, right? What we want is for people to behave in an environmentally friendly ways. Behaviors have two components. One is the cognitive component, what I think about something, and the other one is the affective component, what I feel about something. Yeah. Most of the messages around climate change, for many years, they have tried to appeal to our cognitive component. So they've been giving us information, right? About, if you drive your car, this is going to happen. If you throw plastic in the ocean, this is going to happen. This is not being very effective. What is proven to be more effective is appealing to the affective engagement, to our affective side, our emotions. And for example, it seems that using images, photos of what is happening is more appealing, and it gets to us more. And this is particularly especially true in the case of children. For children, it seems that climate change is a very emotional issue more than an intellectual issue. So it seems that appealing to the emotions in the case of children is being more effective. If you think about Greta Thunberg, she was mostly appealing to the emotions of people. And one of the issues also about why we don't change our behaviors to more sustainable ones is because we are designed for instant gratification. So if you think about it, many years ago, we were hunter-gatherers, right? We went out, we hunt, we got our animal, we ate it. So we are programmed for instant gratification. We do something because we want to be gratified right now, right? If you think about it, the world these days is designed for that. I am hungry, Deliveroo. I am bored, Instagram. I want a new pair of jeans, online shopping, right? Everything is instant. Climate change, if you change your behavior, what do you see? Nothing. So why should I change it, right? If I get nothing. Oops. But even worse, we know it's even more complicated because we know from a psychological perspective, if we change our behavior in an individual way, it's very uncomfortable being sustainable, right? You have to use public transport. You cannot travel by plane. You cannot buy clothes. You cannot throw waste, right? It's uncomfortable. But from a level of community, it is good for us to behave in a sustainable way, right? We will survive this way probably. So there's a big discrepancy there between what is good for me and what is good for the society from a sustainable point of way. Obviously, there's some also individual differences in how we behave towards climate change. When people think that their actions matter, they're more likely to engage in environmentally friendly behaviors. When people think that a specific behavior that they're doing matters, they're more likely to do it. So, for example, recycling. Everybody has taken more or less that behavior because we know that it works and it's not that complicated to do, right? Negative effect. When we feel very negative about climate change, when it really makes us uncomfortable, we are more likely to engage in environmentally friendly behaviors. When we have lived through something climate change related, we're also more likely to engage in environmentally friendly behaviors. And when our society, when our neighbors are doing and engaging in environmentally friendly behaviors, we are more likely to engage as well because we don't want to be the odd ones out. In general, we are designed to imitate others because many years ago that will help our survival. So in general, if we see that our neighbors are recycling, we will recycle. In general, if we see that our neighbors are cycling to work, we're more likely to work. Yeah. So very often, people, the campaigns, for example, for recycling or for throwing rubbish on the ground, they will say, 70% of people don't recycle. Okay, if you tell me that, we're going to say, all right, if you don't recycle, why should I recycle, right? But if you tell me 30% of people recycle, then I would say, okay, I should do it as well, right? So that is what we have to think about, the messages that we give people about the environment and about sustainable ways. So sometimes people say, okay, I want to change my behaviors. I want to be more environmentally friendly, but I can't. Maybe because, they say, okay, buy an electric car. Okay, first of all, expensive, and I don't know how, I don't know where to charge it. I cannot buy it. Buy organic food. Okay, it's very expensive. I cannot afford it. Okay, go in public transport, but I can't because I live very far away. So you cannot behave more environmentally friendly. What this happens is that if you think that you have to be environmentally friendly, but you can't, you're living in a very uncomfortable situation within yourself. Because what you think, your cognition and your emotions are not going along with your behaviors. So if you cannot change your behaviors, you're more likely to change your cognition and your emotions. To say things like, it is not that important actually that I drive electric. It is not that important that I recycle. Because behaviors, affection, and cognition, they're the three elements of our attitudes, of how we feel towards climate change. For example, in this case, attitudes is how we feel, how we think, and how we act towards many things in our life, right? But all those three elements have to be aligned. If they're not aligned, I will change one or the other to be in alignment. Because if not, I will feel uncomfortable. Yeah. So it is very important that we allow people to change their behaviors if they want to be more environmentally friendly, because if not, they may end up changing their cognitions and their emotions about climate change. And attitudes are very important. So what we think about climate change is very important, right? So social psychologists have been doing quite a lot of work examining attitudes around climate change. And the leader of that field of research is this guy called Anthony Leserowitz. He's in the States, in the University of Yale. And he's been, for many years, he's been examining the attitudes of the Americans about climate change. Americans' attitudes are important because they are the main polluters. Are the main or second? Main. And China and America, right? So they are one of the two. So it's very important what they think, right? And what they do. So Leserowitz has found over the years that there are 6 main attitudes about climate change in the Americans. So we have the alarm. These people are very worried about climate change. very, very worried, very concerned. And they act sustainable because they really are concerned about it. Then we have the concern. Yes, they are okay, a bit worried, but they're not ready to change their behaviors yet. They do support governmental policies, but don't they get involved, but a bit. Then we have the cautious ones. These ones say, okay, I think climate change, yeah, I believe in it a bit, yes, but I'm not going to do much about it. Then we have the disengaged. These guys are the ones saying, I don't want to know anything. I don't want to know anything about the problem, really. I have so many wars in my life. Climate change is not one of them. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. And it doesn't really provoke any big emotion in me. Then you have the doubtful. These ones are the ones doubting whether climate change really exists. And they obviously they don't engage in any environmentally friendly behaviors. And then finally, we have the dismissive. These ones are the ones saying climate change doesn't exist, full stop, it is not happening. And so they have been running polls for the last 10 to 20 years. This last one was conducted last year. The good thing is that the number of alarmed people is increasing a lot. So this last year, they found that 33% of the Americans are concerned about climate change. 5 or 6 years back, it was only 13%. So the number of people very worried about it is rising. And what Lisa Rabbit says is, okay, let's look at these guys. Let's look at this, this population. And what we have to do is to target the segment that is more likely to change the behaviors. Who are the ones that we can engage, that we can change their attitude and move them to the good side, the bright side, right? Who do you think? Which group will you target if you have to choose one? Which one? Concerned, cautious. Any other? The doubtful. Any other takers? Alarmed. Okay. Any others? No? No? Okay, I'm afraid you should target the disengaged. And you know why? Because they are the ones with the attitude less strong. When you're not engaged in something, you don't care about it much, you haven't thought about it much, your emotions are not very strong about the problem. You don't know that much about the problem. And your behaviors, you're not engaged, basically. So you are the ones, these are the ones more likely to change. Because the dismissive, they don't do anything about the problem, but they feel very strongly about it. So it's much more difficult to change their behaviors and their emotions and their beliefs. So always target the ones which the attitude less strong, with the less strong emotions and beliefs about anything, really. So we should target this 5% of people and try to bring them into the bright side. So far we have talked about cognition about climate change. We have talked about behaviors about climate change. And I want to talk about the mental health effects of climate change. And also we talk about emotions about climate change. Okay. So let's consider first the effects that climate change is having on our mental health. This is quite a new area of research. And before we go, let me tell you about some facts about mental health. When we talk about mental health, we are talking about mental problems, illnesses, and disorders. So we talk about things like depression, mood disorders, bipolar disorders, eating disorders, conduct disorders. But we also talk about mental wellness, mental well-being, resilience. To give you an idea, every year, 1 billion people is affected by mental health issues. It is a massive problem. 1 in 5 people in the first world countries are affected by a mental health issue every year. By 2030, mental health issues will be the biggest cause of mortality and morbidity. Okay? And the problem is that we're starting to see now that climate change is a threat to mental health. So if we are already talking about a very high level of mental health, climate change is only going to worsen it. In every climate change disaster, so in every flood, every earthquake, every big drought, for every physical injury that we see in survivors, we see 40 cases of mental health problems. But yet no one talks about it. Mental health has never been discussed in COP. Never. I think COP26 was the last one, Carlos tells me. COP26 had in the agenda health, but mental health was not included in the agenda. So we're missing in the climate change crisis a massive element, and mental health is the one. And the big problem is that, for example, we know that in every big climate change catastrophe, around between 15% and 70% of children involved will have a mental health issue. And the majority of them are untreated, even in the first world countries. And that goes across the board. The cost of mental health is already massive. By 2030, will be $6 trillion. But yet it's only 2% of government budgets. And the problem is that if we have so many people with mental health issues being untreated, that only they get worse. So the idea is that if climate change is worsening mental health, then we have to work together. Mental health measures have to work at the same time as climate change measures. If we prevent climate change problems, we will be preventing at the same time mental health issues, saving resources and making everything more sustainable. And so far, researchers have been examining 3 types of mental health, of climate change effects on mental health. Let me explain the 3 of them, which they are. The first is when we have a catastrophic event linked to climate change. So a flood, an earthquake, a tsunami. What happens here? Many of the victims, of the survivors, we experience mental health issues, as many as 60% in many cases. And what we see is trauma, shock, PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a condition that was first quoted to define the conditions in which many soldiers came back from war. Anxiety, depression, suicide, community violence, child and domestic abuse. When parents go through one of these situations, the level of stress shoot up. And when parents' level of stress increases a lot, they are more likely to be harsher with the children, and they're more likely to resort to violence and physical abuse to the children. The same happens with domestic violence. And we also see more substance abuse because people are trying to cope, and sometimes they resort to drugs and alcohol to cope for them. To give you an idea of numbers, after Katrina, the hurricane, 1 in 6 survivors develop PTSD, 1 in 6. And the problem with mental health is that, when a catastrophe like this happens, the first responders come in, right? They take care of the physical injuries of the survivors. And more, the first responders also include mental health experts. The mental health experts, they take care also of those with mental health issues. But the problem is that mental health issues, they happen over a long time. They can be present for months. So what happens then? Because very often victims of these events, they have help in the aftermath, and that's it. And afterwards, what happens with these people? And we have issues, for example, such as PTSD. PTSD may appear 3 to 4 months later after the event. Do they get help? In many cases, they don't. And that only worsens their situation. Psychologists have also examined the effects of prolonged weather events on mental health. So long droughts, heat waves, pollution, that also has a negative influence in our mental health. We see mood disorders, anxiety disorders, low self-esteem. In heat waves, for example, heat stress is a thing. And we see a rise in hospital admissions because of mental health issues during heat waves. During heat waves also, we see an increase of violence, of killings as well. Prolonged long droughts, for example, may lead to many people migrating, having to look for water somewhere else. The level of usually migrants have a very high level of mental health issues, and for them, sadly, most of them, it is untreated. No one takes care of them. We also see, and we're going to see it more and more, conflict over resources. When people have to fight over water, over food, that brings interpersonal conflict, anxiety, poor mental health in general. So this is also what we're happening, and sadly, we're going to see more of this more and more often. And the final effect that psychologists are examining about climate change and mental health are the indirect effects. So what we're realizing now is that many people who have never been in a climate change crisis, so many people that have never been in a flooding, many people that have never experienced a prolonged heat wave, are also experiencing the negative consequences of climate change. Why? Because they see it in the media, they watch the news, they see it in the paper, in the internet, social media, and they're also getting affected. Their mental health is being affected. So there's been a study just published this year by Ogubunde and colleagues, and they examined 12,000 undergrad students in 32 countries, asking them about their perception of climate change and how they perceive their mental health. And what they found was that those young people who were feeling more worried about climate change also reported having sleeping problems. They thought that the mental health was worse, and they reported feeling very negative emotions about it. So this is one of the big problems that everybody, all of us, potentially can feel the negative consequence of climate change. So as you can see, it's a massive problem that we have in our hands. So let me talk. So I just mentioned negative emotions. Let me talk now about negative emotions and why should we care about them as well when we talk about climate change. So first of all, we should care about emotions. Emotions are very important. They are my main area of research, that's one, but also emotions guide how we process information. So if you feel very negative or very positive about a topic, when you process information about it, that will have an influence on how you process that information. Emotions also motivate our actions. If we feel happy, if we feel sad, if we feel angry, if we feel if we are scared, that will motivate our actions. Some actions that we're going to see in a minute are they provoke actions, for example. Some emotions impede our actions. But also emotions influence our mental health in a big way. Negative emotions influence badly our mental health. And we know because we're starting to see some evidence that the negative emotions about climate change are negatively affecting our emotions. Sorry, our mental health. Okay? So what many psychologists are trying to understand now is they're saying, okay, if emotions influence our actions, we have some people that are very active in climate change, right? They engage in environmentally friendly behaviors, they are activists. If we manage to understand what emotions that people that are very active in the climate change field feel, and if we can make everybody else feel the same emotions, maybe that's a way to promote action towards climate change. So they have been trying to understand what emotions we feel towards climate change. And so they go out and they ask people, climate change, how do you feel about it? Tell me the emotions that you feel about climate change. As you can imagine, there are not many positive emotions that people mention. There's one that people mention often, and is hope. Hope is an activating emotion. Hope is the desire for a particular thing to happen, for something good to happen, right? Think about when you fight for climate change, when you fight, when you go out and you protest, or you do an act, or you're an activist for climate change, you have hope. If there's no hope, why would you do anything, right? So it matters. Hope matters in climate change action, but with a cautious note. Some people say yes, hope may be good, but be careful because too much hope may be bad, because then we get relaxed, right? So it is not only the type of emotion that we feel, but it's also the amount of emotion that we feel about the problem. And then I'm afraid that I just have negative emotions to talk about climate change. A very common emotion that people mention is fear. And again, a degree of fear may be good because it activates us. If we are afraid, we do things to fight for what we fight for. We have fear. Too much fear is paralyzing. So we have to be careful with how much fear we provoke on people. That's how many people now are saying, the doom and gloom message about climate change, stop it, because it doesn't bring anything good. We need to bring hope. Another emotion, another mechanism is denial. Denial is a mechanism that was first quoted by Freud. And when we go into denial is when something is so hurtful to our sense of self. When we feel very threatened, we go into denial. We say, okay, stop it. I don't want to know anything about it. This is not happening. Stop it, right? Denial is very bad for climate change action. And denial can happen in an individual level. I may say, I don't want to know anything about it, whereas you fight for it. Or we can also see it as a community level. So, for example, there were some studies in Norway. Norway is a country that depends a lot on oil. And in Norway, they were saying for many years, they were saying a community level denial about climate change. They didn't want to think about it because it attacked their way of living. And what we're seeing now lately is another form of denial. I don't know if you have heard people talking about this, and many people are saying now, I don't worry too much about climate change because someone is going to create this technology. It's going to be amazing, and it's going to solve the problem. Right? They're waiting for Superman to come and solve the problem for us. That, I think, is another form of denial. I won't worry about it because Superman is going to come and save us all. Right? So denial, very bad for climate change action. Another emotion that we see a lot in climate change is boredom and apathy. And again, as I was saying before, we have been talking about climate change for a long time. People say, okay, stop now, let's talk about something else. It can also be a way of dealing with a worry. I may say, okay, that's it, I'm not going to discuss it anymore. That's it. Again, boredom and apathy are deactivating emotions. So we have to try not to recreate those on people when we talk about climate change. And one emotion that has received a lot of attention lately, that you may have heard about it, is eco-anxiety, right? This emotion is quite a new one. It has gained a lot of traction in the press. And eco-anxiety is being defined as an obsessive and potentially disabling worry about the future of Earth as a result of climate change. So it is not a condition yet. So the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, hasn't termed it as a mental illness, but it is an emotion that has been linked with many different symptoms, negative symptoms. So people reporting high levels of eco-anxiety are also reporting feeling apathy, thinking all the time about the problem of climate change, not sleeping well, feeling weak, having panic attacks, experiencing learned helplessness. This is an issue that when you feel that there's nothing you can do about a problem, you feel that is learned helplessness, when the problem is too big for you. Yeah. So this is what people are reporting when they feel that they have eco-anxiety. And interestingly, eco-anxiety is being felt mostly by children and young people. And this is particularly worrying because we have at least 50% of young people are reporting experiencing eco-anxiety. And this is particularly worrying because during childhood, all the brain is being form, and all the neural connections are being formed. When children are very stressed or feel very anxious, those connections may get altered. So having a strong negative emotions, strong stress, strong anxiety during childhood is very bad. And we have many children experiencing it. The same happens during adolescents and young adults' lives. Most psychiatric disorders appear between the ages of 14 and 24. When you have these young people saying that they're feeling very stressed and very anxious about climate change, you're adding another stressor onto their lives, and then the likelihood of them developing mental health issues increases. So we have to be very careful with how our young people and the children are feeling about climate change, because it may affect the development. And for example, when mothers feel very stressed in their pregnancy, that may also influence the development of the baby in uterus. So if moms also report feeling very stressed about climate change when they're pregnant, that may also have a negative impact on the babies before they're even born. There's this last study that was the same study that I mentioned before, of Ogunde again. When they ask the young people, they say, okay, do you feel eco-anxiety? How does it make you feel? Do you engage into environmentally friendly behaviors? The good thing is that when people felt anxious about the climate change, they also reported feeling engaging into more pro-environmentally friendly behaviors. So some level of eco-anxiety may be good, but at the same time, higher levels of eco-anxiety also led to worse mental health, mental well-being. So a bit of eco-anxiety is good, too much is bad for them, right? And just as a quick note, just think that, as it often happens, the interplay of climate change crisis and the mental health crisis is affecting, again, some people more than others. The inequalities are getting bigger again. Who is the people being more affected by climate change and mental health? The usual suspects, sadly: women, young people, outdoor laborers, migrants, and people already suffering from mental health issues. So we have to be very mindful of who is affecting more the mental health crisis and the climate change crisis. So I think I would leave it here. Just one final thought. Just consider that climate change psychology has to play a big part in the fight towards climate change. We have to think about mental health and climate change as being interconnected and playing a game together. And we need to work together. I think the fields have to work together so we can fight for climate change together. Thank you very, very much for listening, and it was a total pleasure to be here.
Okay, thank you so much, Victor and Anna. Now we welcome your curiosity. If you have any questions, please raise your hand so I can give you the mic.
Thank you, Anna, for the great talk. And this is a really, really interesting topic. And my question is more maybe an advice from you as a psychologist, because as we've seen, and this last slide that you showed, it kind of reflects that when we feel anxious, we tend to have behaviors that are more eco-friendly, that are better for the environment. But as we've seen in the beginning, most of the things that makes us happy, maybe because of our instant gratification, are the things that make it worse. So by trying to make the planet better, we are making ourselves feel bad, because we don't have the sense of connection that making the planet better is better for us. Our entire society is built on the concepts of everything that we wish for and we long for to be happy is actually not good for the planet. So how do you, I'm particularly interested in how you teach children, or what coping mechanisms you share with children to start changing this perception of what they need to be happy, and how they can associate happiness to the things that they need to do to improve the planet?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there's something that we could do, and there's been some research about it, trying to create a green status, the green being cool. So right now, if you think about it, everything that is cool for children is, children and young people, fast cars, flash, clothes, buying stuff, right? That's the cool. Can we change the being cool? What if we, can we change the mindset and say, okay, from now on, being green is going to be being cool? That is a change of mindset, but it could happen. So we have, for example, fashion brands that are creating clothes from recycling, right? Right now, years ago, the problem is the design was terrible and they were very expensive, so people couldn't afford them, and no one wanted to buy them. Right now, we're seeing fashion brands creating cool stuff, nice clothes, and more they're getting more affordable. With that, I think we can fight for making being green, being cool, kind of thing. And I think for children, I think it's easier because for children, think that everything depends on education. If we raise them since they're young to think that they have to help the planet, they will grow up being like that. The problem is that our generations, certainly not mine, you're younger than me, but we were not raised that way. So education plays a massive part. And we now see children that they are very convinced that they have to recycle, that they have to cycle to school. So everything's about changing habits. The problem is that when the attitudes that we have, I was talking before, they're very difficult to change. They get established very fast, but it's very difficult to change them. So if we install in children the right attitudes, then there's nothing to change, right? They will grow up with the right attitudes. And also, I think there's something that we have to think about. There's a lot of research saying that when we help others or we help the planet, we feel better. So people that have higher levels of social behavior feel better. And there's something we have to encourage more and more. If you behave well towards the planet, your well-being also will rise. But for that, we have to convince people that climate change is really happening and is an issue, and we have to help them to make that shift.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful talk. And I just like to take the discussion forward, which you were having with the honorable gentleman. You talk about educating kids, and then you also talked about, for example, yourself when you were going to school. You were young, you had a more carefree life, and you were not told about the responsibility of you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Now, when you start to teach kids that they have to do something, even with a positive spin, they feel some responsibility, right? I mean, for example, I am a father to two young kids, and we've been through episodes when, for example, kids say, I don't want to eat the sheep. I don't eat chicken. Chicken is a good animal. They're very friendly. I don't drink milk. This is the baby's milk of the cow. So they are perhaps being put under a burden which you were not put in, which I was not put in. And I would say maybe that was the normal or the traditional way of upbringing kids when, you only put responsibilities on them at a certain age. And then um, I would like to hear your thoughts about the age appropriateness of giving them education on environmental issues so we don't end up damaging our younger generation in pursuit of a quick climate change solution, which I think it's not quick. This is something which is going to take a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think we have to be careful with not to, as we're saying, not putting too much pressure on children, which they are feeling. I think that we cannot equate the if you don't behave sustainably, you're a bad person and it's your fault that the planet is gonna collapse. That's not the message, right? I think the message is that I think we should be giving is, we all live together. The planet, we live in this planet. We have to take care of it, right? How do we do it? And there are many ways to teach children how to do it in that way. So but eating chicken is perfectly fine. Can we have the chicken? Maybe can we buy chicken that has been when I say raised, not raised, grown in a nice way, right? Let's do that. So that can we buy maybe clothes that have been we know that are sustainable? Let's do that if we can afford them. Can we maybe cycle to school because it's better for the environment? Let's do that. Can we take the train instead of flying because it's better? Let's do that. So that those messages children understand very easily, I think. What we cannot tell them is, if you don't do it, you're bad and this is your fault. I don't think we can go into the fault. It is my fault problem. I think also what we're seeing now is that many children or young people are feeling angry with us because they say, you are the ones that ruined the world for us, and now you have to pay for your mistakes, right? I think that as children grow, they will stop. I think that mindset will start to disappear. I think, um, but I think with children, I think we start from the beginning, from early life, simple messages with no blame. That's I think what the way to go. Which
I mean, the message is pretty simple, but then the consequences are pretty hard to carry out, right? I mean, for example, let's do this and let's um, not use something which is plastic, right? Which means now somebody has to buy something which is not made of plastic, add to the parents' duties, and then the parents feel bad, kids feel bad. The message gets diluted. Hey, if we don't need to do this, why are we doing this? I think like there has to be some sort of guidance given by experienced psychologists that we should introduce XYZ topic at XYZ age, because before that, kids just do not have the capacity to, really do those green actions, no matter how much of a positive spin we put on them. And I think right now it is missing. I see schools all over the world, which in the effort, which I think is a very commendable effort, that we have to teach kids how to live in a more eco-friendly way. They're just dumping a lot of stuff on kids. Overall, the concept is fantastic because it's our world and we have to take care of it. But then the age appropriateness of it is not being considered.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's quite a new area of research. It's growing slowly. And also, I think one thing that I feel very strongly about is that I think these days we tend to dump everything in the schools.
Yes.
The schools have to teach children about body training and climate change and brushing your teeth and maths and chemistry and everything, right? Parents also have responsibility, right? And actually, the behaviors of the children, they learn them mostly from the parents. So I think, first of all, it's the parents' responsibility, what we do at home. And also the schools, yes, also play a part. But we cannot say everything, we put everything on the schools. But I agree with you that guidelines, age-appropriate guidelines would be good. And I think I haven't seen them yet. I know some schools do different programs, but I think everyone does them a bit as how they feel and when they suit them. But I don't think that we have guidelines, official guidelines as per se in that. But yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you for being here.
Okay, we have a question in the back. Could you throw the cube, please?
Now that you have mentioned about the responsibility doesn't just fall on the schools but also on the parents. But there are scenarios where the schools teach kids that the climate change is happening. You need to be very cautious about what you're doing in your life, how much purchases you make, etc., etc. But when they come to their homes, and if the parents don't follow it, right, and they say, no, this is not happening under my roof, you have to follow when you are under my roof, whatever the rules and regulations that whatever it is. But what is it that how can we rectify this? The adults could be the problem over here, in order to move forward for the change. And when you spoke about the mental health that are the reasons behind the climate change, but how is a kid's mental health being affected? Because at schools he's been taught, like, you have to be like this, but when he comes home, his parents says, no, this is not happening. So where do they fall under mental health categories exactly?
I mean, I think, and that's a good question. I think in everything that schools teach, And then some parents, sometimes we don't agree, right? So that happens in climate change and in many, many other things. So children, they have to live with some kind of discrepancies in their lives, right? That is life, and they have to learn about it because that happens. It happens within ourselves. I may say one thing to my child one day, and then the other day maybe I'm feeling a bit, and sometimes the opposite, right? That's discrepancies they feel about that. Children have to live with it, and it's part of growing up. And most of them, are okay with it. When schools say one thing and parents don't say the other thing, I do believe in a degree of personal freedom. If some people don't want to engage in recycling or any other environmentally friendly behaviors, is it their choice? Maybe, yes, I don't know. I mean, one thing that we can do is, okay, if we want everybody to behave in an environmentally friendly behavior, make it by law. So let's say by law, everybody is recycling. If not, you got a fine. By law, everybody's doing the same. No, you got a fine. That's the only way in which you can make sure that everybody does a specific action, right? If not, we have to rely on people's choice and people's freedom to do it or don't do it, right?
Right. And if you say by law again, do you think that people in democratic societies do behave if I bring it in as a law over here? Because COVID kind of proved some said they don't want to take vaccines. They said they didn't believe in vaccines at all. And do you think that is going to make any change? That
I think when you still things by law, I think you get more people to follow. Probably not everyone, but I think you get more people. I mean, look about it when the smoking ban was imposed in planes and bars and restaurants. Now, and before it was so normal to get into a plane and smoke, go into a restaurant and smoke. Now, if people do it, you're like, are you crazy? How can you do that, right? So laws, not everybody will follow them, but I think they are effective in changing behaviors over time. Do we want to go into that direction? That's not my place to say, but we all have our opinions on that. But it can be a way.
Okay, do we have another question? Okay, we'll take one from Zoom. Yeah. Okay, so Craig is asking, what percentage of people need to get behind an idea before it has an impact on changing other people's behaviors?
Oof. To be honest, I have no clue. I have no idea. I mean, what we know, as I said, we know that when most of people in a community engages in a behavior, people tend to imitate that behavior. So I cannot tell you a percentage, but I can tell you that the majority matters. I don't know what the majority has to be, but the more people do something, the more people will follow. That I know.
Okay, so we have another question here. Yeah, could you please throw the... Oh, actually, you go first.
Ask a question? I just wanted to ask if you have any comment or any opinion on what we can learn about the psychology from Indigenous groups, past and present, who are just naturally connected to a sense of responsibility and more experience living with the lands, and obviously some of the most affected people. And what made me think about it was when you said instant gratification that maybe was previous in the hunter-gatherer societies. A lot of Indigenous groups have a deep connection to tradition and passing on information from thousands and thousands of years. And it's in stark contrast to our very rapid attention spans now. So yeah, I was wondering if you could learn.
Yeah, and I haven't done any research on that, but what I think, as Anna, you touched on that, I think Indigenous groups are much more connected to nature. We have, many of us, we live in big cities, we have lost that connection to nature. So I think because of that, Indigenous groups are much more likely to take care of it, to appreciate it and be very mindful of it. There's a lot of research coming out trying to understand why we care so much about climate change, why climate change is negatively affecting our mental health. Why should losing a few whales and a few plants impact our mental health? And the idea that people are having is that when we are in connection with nature, we feel better. So being in nature help us reduce our stress levels. It'll help us like reset our cognitive mechanisms, and so it makes us feel much better. We know, for example, that when people exercise outdoors, the benefits are much higher than when we exercise indoors, for example. So there is a sense that being outdoors, being in the green, is good for us, for our mental health and well-being. And I think that is the case for indigenous groups. And because they live in much more contact with nature, they are more mindful about it.
Okay, so we have a question here. Could you throw the cube, please?
Thank you so much. So, quick question. What is the distance between the alarm or concerned people and between fanatism? Like, as we saw last time, these teenagers pouring tomato sauce into a paint. Like, is this a real concern or alarm from their part? Because also they're pushing away some disengaged percentage. Like, in my case personally, for example, I just
So your question is, sorry, what is the difference between the alarm and
the concerned.
the concern? So the alarm are very worried. So the alarm are the ones that engage in environmentally friendly behaviors, know a lot about the problem. They do research. They know exactly how the mechanisms of climate change work, and they have very negative emotions about it.
Okay.
Whereas the concern, they have the same but to a lower degree. So it's just a difference of degrees of worry, concern, and actions.
And do you think these actions, I mean, these negative actions, are also pushing away the disengaged percentage? Or?
I think, for example, I was talking about that with Professor Duarte this morning. I don't know if you have been following the news about in London, in England, about all this. I don't know if you have been following that, but in England, there's this group, Extinction Rebellion, I think it is. And they, for the last 2 weeks, they have been gluing themselves to the roads. People cannot get to work. People cannot go to hospital. They've been throwing paintings into important painting important pieces of art. In my opinion, they are trying to raise awareness about climate change. In my opinion, they're pushing everybody away, because the only thing you're doing is, excuse my language, pissing everybody off, right? So people think, people that are not really worried about it or a bit worried, I say, you know what? Yes, climate change is a problem. Stop it and let me get on with my life. So I think those kind of actions, in my opinion, are getting totally the wrong result, the opposite result as what they want. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Okay, the time is up. Thank you so much. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Hi, sorry, thank you very much. It was a very interesting talk. And I just would like to reconnect what Michelle was saying before. I was reading a while ago about the solastalgia. I don't know if it's,
yeah.
Do you think it's something that can be used as a way to push people to change their behavior?
Yeah, so solastalgia is a term, is the same as ecological grief. So when we lose species, for example, people sensing having a very deep sense of losing something important for them, and it's quite a new term as well that has been quoted. I think we can, to a degree. I think too much sadness about climate change may be detrimental. I think a certain level is good. Too much can be bad. If we feel that everything is lost, we won't get into action. So I think a bit of it may be good. And also it's very different for different people. So for you, not seeing a whale again in your life may be the most super sad. Someone else may say, it was a whale, it's not that important. So we have to be mindful also of individual differences in emotions and feel and cognition and behaviors as well. But yeah, that's a feeling that is receiving a lot of attention lately as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your questions. Thank you for joining. We want to give a piece of art to Dr. Anna as an appreciation gift.
Thank you very much.
This is made by a Kaust artist called Ati Atoba.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.